Okay, hello everyone, happy Monday. Welcome back to our conversation about the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. We've got some great guests today to talk about the foundations of caste. This week we're covering the first 4 pillars that she identifies out of 8. And well, let's just get started. So I'm going to bring on my, hello, Richard. Sorry, surprise, you're on. And then this week, well, thank you, Richard, for joining us. And then this week we have Angelle Maua, who has joined us before. Hello, she's returning to topic. Hi, so glad to see you.
Thank you for having me.
And then this time we have someone new coming on. I'm gonna go ahead and add you to the stream now, Gerald, if you're ready, so you can say hi to everybody. Hello, it's good to see you again.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm glad that I'm here joining, discussing, learning, as well as being influenced as well. I'm just happy to be here. Sorry I just got out of class, but I am here. So
seriously, thank you, all of you, because I know that you've all got jobs. We've all got jobs. You all have jobs that require that you work longer hours. I know Richard just got home, and Gerald, you're still on campus. Angel, I know you're traveling too to get back to your place after a long day. So I appreciate all of you making the time to do this on a Monday night at 7 o'clock. And it's not, I mean, I have fun when I'm having these conversations with the people that I'm with, but it's not a fun topic. So it can get kind of heavy on a Monday night. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to, today we're talking about the foundations of caste, pillars 1 through 4, and that'll be running at the bottom of the screen. Does anyone, before we get started, because I know, Gerald, this is your first time on, and Angel, you've had a little bit of a change in work. I don't know if anyone wants to share what they've been up to, or since you're new to this series in the fall, if you want to share a little bit about what you're doing before we jump in.
Oh, is it okay if I go first, Gerald?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm giving you permission.
No, I'm still doing the same thing in the community with the my collective, and I'm now at Poway Adult School doing parenting classes as a community lecturer, which is really nice, talking to parents of LGBTQ plus students, and actually going to continue that into winter semester at Poway Adult School. So I'm super excited about that. I just partnered with Sheila Mitra from UCSD on some very social justice reform in schools and equity for students. That's going to be a huge project. So I'm excited about that. Shouts out to Sheila if you're listening. And also the San Diego Black LGBT Coalition, starting up our groups again after COVID, which was hard. So shout out to the San Diego Black LGBT Coalition as well. So yeah, I'm just keeping busy, trying not to go insane with the new normal, and just enjoying the work that I do in the community. So it's nice to meet you all again. See you all again.
Awesome. Thank you, Angel.
Thank you.
Gerald?
Well, I just want to congratulate, hope I don't pronounce her name incorrectly, Angela.
Angel? Just Angel, yeah. Okay. It's okay.
I think it goes, so it's worthwhile to always be an advocate to the community, whatever communities that we may serve. But there's a quote that I typically use: we become rich by the people that we serve. Mm-hmm. Not just by financial situations, but by people we serve, because people gravitate towards love, and when you lead people, you're actually loving them so they can become become the best version of themselves. So I think that's awesome. Me personally, I'm a professor. I'm at Harvard Community College. I teach math as well as computer information systems. So I'm a programmer, databases, all that other stuff, and numbers. But I also am a community advocate as well. I believe I met Letty right?
Mhm.
I met her through just our communication through an event that I had planned called Law School Care. And there we had, I believe it was over 30 companies looking to hire for over a collective over 120 jobs. And it was a pretty good turnout. And that's through that event. Of course, there was history behind it on how I could just help people that are suffering and lacking resources through the pandemic. And I came up with this idea and just started telling people about it. And it was a huge turnout. And from there, I was able to network with a lot of individuals. And it's been phenomenal. Even with the Department of Rehabilitation, one partnered with me. The Kern County Libraries want to partner with me. The mayor of Bakersfield calling me. So it's been phenomenal. Just having this event, and I'm just thankful that me having a heart to serve has led to this. So.
Yes, and thank you so much for answering my call. This is sort of, with Epic Consulting, I do work with the schools, but then there's also all this, extra things that we want to do in the community to have conversations and help empower people and just bring people together. So I'm grateful that people come here to talk about these kinds of things, and we're also encouraging people to read, which is always awesome. So we will keep doing that. Okay. I don't want to leave you out, Richard, but you're here every week. If there's anything you want to share, we always know what's going on with Richard.
I'm
there's
still
a lot to
college, so.
Okay. Okay, so this section of caste, the Foundations of Caste, are 8 pillars that Wilkerson, in her research, sort of decided this is the way that it's broken up, and these are the things that are the foundation and have helped to sort of establish and continue to reinforce these systems in this country. So pillar 1, she calls the divine will and the laws of nature. And I think this is the shortest, maybe it's the shortest part of this section in these first 4, but I feel like it said a lot because of the topic. And this is something people don't want to talk about. I don't talk about any of this, but when we talk about religion, divine will, this is just, the nature this is the way that things are. These are the laws. They say of nature, but they're definitely of man. And this idea of sacred texts. So I didn't want to add to this banner that I'm putting up, but if there's anything that anyone wants to kind of call out in terms of sacred texts and the examples she gives of the Hindu and Christian building up of these caste systems in India and America. Does anyone want to start the conversation?
I you know how I feel about the Bible. In the first place, I already have an issue with that. It's then later on when we're reading the pillars, they want you to worship and do all this stuff and conform, but they won't teach you how to read it. That's a whole issue we'll talk about later. Then I'm just, how did they pick? Okay, so how does she have the Hindu religion? Why the Hindu and Christian? Of all the religions that are out there, of all the beliefs and systems that are out there, how do we whittle this down to Hindu and Christian? Help me wrap my head around that part.
I think that she's tackling the Hindu caste system from the beginning of the book, right? We're talking about these are the examples of caste in human history, and the most recent or the most pervasive, because even in India, though that caste system was officially dismantled in the 50s, it's still part of their culture. And then in America, this idea that after slavery, there was no more caste or whatever kind of system in place, and then Nazi Germany was the other. So, in terms of religion and sacred texts, that's why she's going after. Not going after, but that's why she's listing Hinduism and Christianity as the 2 sacred texts that sort of are used to build the system.
Okay.
And
I kind of figured that, but then, the Philippines, they have a caste system. The African Americans, we have a caste system. The indigenous have a caste system, as you know what I mean. So there's a lot of other folks out there under the rainbow that have caste systems. So I was just curious, and I guess because Hinduism is the most ancient, and I get that, but I still question the latter. So, and I found it very interesting that they use the body as to label the layers in the hierarchy of the caste system. Like Brahim, the caste is from the mouth, and then you have what is it? Kashtir is the arms, and then you have Visha, which is the thighs, and then you have Shudra, which are the feet, which is the lowest form, which they would say are the untouchables. Right. So I just found that very interesting visualization of their caste system. I thought that was a good visualization from the head to the feet being your close to the ground, but you're the dirtiest. Yeah.
It helps people agree with it, maybe go along with it.
They subscribe to it because they can visualize it. Exactly.
I was going to say, and I'll be honest, I'm a little bit behind on the series. But I know instinctively that every type of culture, every type of entity and idea can always be traced. And what I mean by that is it's difficult for someone to create something without it first being an idea. And so we look at everything that's surrounding us. Like one prime example of what I think about it are Nintendo games. A lot of Nintendo games are video games and so forth. They have Greek mythology in them. And where did the Greek mythology originate from? Which particular country, which continent, and so forth. And the reason why I mention that, because a lot of times when it comes to like religion, a lot of things can be traced back to what we are experiencing today. So and hopefully I'm not too far off from the topic of what we're discussing, but I always think about how has history shaped how we're living today? How has ideas and thoughts and things that that has gone on in the past help shape today? Where it's more so the dominant type of culture seem to overlap a lot of some things that we may do today. And by that, to me, that lets me know that when we study history, sometimes a lot of history has been lost due to dominant cultures and so forth. So I think that's something to always look at whenever like this author comes up with ideas and starts saying things. How did these ideas and where did they originate from?
So then if we look at this, where the way that she's built this book, that these caste systems are undergirded by the reading of sacred texts of these respective cultures. So we're not here to attack religion necessarily, but this idea that you're like, Gerald, kind of what you're saying, where did it come from? So like, who wrote this, who came up with this idea, and then how it has, or how it maintained that caste system over a certain number of years, and even now how it's being used. And I guess we could use in America the Christian version of the Bible.
And even if
Angel, I know you're dying to say something.
I mean, to me, and again, I hope I'm not too far off, because this is my first time on here. So even if I may add, I know like in the Bible, the judicial system is how it was set up is very similar to how we do it here today, at least in America. So that's why I'm saying, the Bible existed for so many years, but some of the things that they used back then, we use it sometimes in today's time. So that's why I guess I was getting at is, history. How has history shaped how we do things today?
Right, but the history has been very toxic and framed for other folks and not for people of color. So that is what we're trying to dismantle, is like the whole gerbil wheel of creating and maintaining this toxicity based on a book that can't even really truly be explained. I'm just gonna leave it at that. So like, how do we move forward from here? You know what I mean? How do we dismantle that? How do we dispel that? We have to start with our policies that are in place now, our laws that are in place now, the hundreds and centuries and decades of laws that have been in place for white folks for the protection of white folks, but not for the interest of any person of color in the United States of America. Do you know what I mean? So it's up to make the people that are in policy making right now accountable and make these policies accessible for change, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree. It's almost like there's different types of cultures, but it seems like we're living beneath one culture that has been symptomatically installed into, in America and many other places, I would say. So I definitely agree, but I think, I think of it as like the Matrix, the Matrix movie, where you had, I guess the main character, he was just so different, he had his own mindset, and look at the results and the impact that he had. So I think in today's time, at least with my experiences and my lineage or people that I'm around, it seems as if people are, I guess you could say, they are growing their own mindset. They're not relying on symptomatic things or what has been placed back then. It's more of they creating their own reality. Yeah, I think when people start to create their own reality, they start to look at things differently. Mm-hmm. And in essence, they begin to start dismantling what has been installed for so many years.
So this is what we're hoping for, right? When we have these conversations, that is the case, that when a book like this or any other book where there's research into why these things why we're seeing what we're seeing now, what's the historical reference, what's the ancient reference in some cases, wherever it's possible to know that, and then understanding that what's happening now in any community somebody didn't just decide one day that that's the way it was going to be. And as we move into the second pillar, this kind of, it's infuriating, but this idea that there was a system put in place so that people on purpose did not have power over themselves or their families. So pillar 2 is about heritability. And this section breaks down class and caste, and then talks a little bit about the changes made to established law or lineage, I guess I should say. The first quote that I'm going to pull from the book talks specifically about lineage and children born. So children born in this country, and this is America, before it was America, it's usually Virginia is the example, shall be held in bond or free only according to the condition of the mother. And this is a departure from even standards today, right? Like on birth certificates. Go ahead, Angel.
No, I didn't want to cut you off. But I'm on the Kindle, so it's a different page. But you look under, and that's why I sent you that. When I sent you that email, I was like, "Oh, I'm on a Kindle."
Right.
That's why the pages are off. Okay, so if you look, so they reference India, and generally the father is one where you're recognized as far as rank. If you're recognized by your father's name, right? But like you said, colonial Virginia, it's by the mother, and that was set up. Why? Remember, if we read, that was set up so the slave owners could continue to impregnate the slave women, make money off of them, not only on them, but on their children and their children, their children for the rest of their generations. So that's why that assembly decreed in 1662, be it therefore enacted and declared by the present Grand Assembly that all children born in the country shall be held in bond or free according to the condition of their mother, which I think is total and complete. That's the part where I was just like, dang. I mean, we know this 1662, and this is still prevalent, what, up to 2000 from what I read? The year 2000? Year 2000.
In Alabama.
Yes. Yes. Oh, wait.
You're on mute, Richard.
Sorry, I was going to say even as late as just 2012, where some of the laws had finally changed. Just
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I need more water.
No.
Go ahead.
For those who are looking for that page, it's either 104 or 105 at the bottom. That decree where it says they allow the enslavers to claim the children of Black women, the vast majority of women who were enslaved, as property for life and for ensuring generations. So it invited them to impregnate the women themselves, if so. But then we go into that whole pollution thing. So yeah, I have questions about that. That's coming up in one.
Oh, it's very convenient. It's like what you were talking about the religion. Like, you know, we talked in I think it was the first or second session, we talked about what was the driver behind religious persecution, or what, you know, there was Christian and non-Christian was like the original sort of caste system. But then when you start teaching Native peoples, indigenous peoples, and your enslaved peoples about Christ, and suddenly you have all these converts, then that can't possibly be the way that you categorize people anymore. So as we go, we're changing the rules, right?
Yeah, they change the rules to their convenience, for their convenience, for their comfort. It's always about their comfort level. Don't get me started. I was told not too long ago I was comfortable to look at.
What?
Don't get me started.
This is outrageous. Well, so last week we talked about Nazis. These are difficult conversations to have. And last week we're talking about the horrific nature of the planning of the extermination of a people. And we had a lot of silent moments because it was like, is this really happened? This idea that in 1662, what, less than 50 years after what, you know, 1619, the whatever original date that we started counting when people were here, less than 50 years from that date, we're deciding, oh, you know what? We're not going to do heirs by father anymore. So legally, now from now on, these people over here, the children, if they're born under the mother and they're mine, even though they're mine, that means I get to own them and keep enslaving them, and then their generation after that, and then the generation after that. And it was all for profit.
Yeah, and by the will of God.
So, manifest destiny, right?
Yeah.
Anyone else want to say anything about that?
No, it's very.
Okay, so go ahead.
I was gonna say it's interesting, and it's like, you know, are we really surprised that I mean, so all this stuff was like being planned. I mean, I'm sure there was other stuff that was being planned as well, but at the end of the day, it's like, is that same mindset, or how competent is that mindset? Does it still exist today? Like, how competent is it? Is that mindset still existing today?
It still exists. It exists. We just don't see it, but it's there, and it's there.
But how competent? Like, is it 100% as it was back then, or has it slowly decreased to like 90%, 80%? That's the question.
No. Do you see what happened last year? You saw what happened last year.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that is the answer to your question. It's just that it's changed in its form and its presentation.
Mm.
Do you
It
understand?
has to. It can't stay the same because things change.
It's evolved with the times. That mindset is still there. You have all of these people of power with this old school mindset, have been raised through the generations with the same mindset. It's just evolved with the times. And now it's to a point where we're getting it because we have technology to back us up. Before, remember when Tupac used to rap about how his encounters with the police, and the other rappers that were coming up in the game, how they were rapping and telling stories about their police encounters or just people in general. And we was like, yeah, right, whatever, you know, I believe when I see it type of thing. Well, now we have the technology to support that, to back that up. And that's the only reason why we are here now having these conversations, because somebody actually filmed what happened to George Floyd. Do you know what I mean? It's ingrained in our history now, and that was the momentum to get our younger generation to lead this movement. It's not just a moment. We're still in this movement and we're still propelling it forward. So the form has changed, but the mindset has not. It's still being taught from generation to generation to generation.
Go ahead, Gerald.
Oh, and I was going to say, I'm sure it relates to how so suddenly it seems that a lot of Black young girls are ended up missing for some reason. I'm sure that has probably a lot to do with it as well, like as far as a symptomatic plan for whatever.
Modern day slavery, human trafficking, sex trafficking, for profit. They want young girls that they can get, again, either impregnate and sell for babies. And people want babies, right? You know, the black market, you know, the dark web. Yeah. Our indigenous, all of our young women are disappearing at high rates and or getting killed. So
yeah, so it just brings attention to all many things that are, like I said, being planned or have a hidden agenda, which is unfortunate. And I mean, it's just unfortunate.
I think
so. I want to go back to the idea of a hidden agenda, because this next piece, I had a couple things about class, but this idea, I feel like once you start talking about these things, it's not hidden. Like once you really start talking about it, and even bringing up, like, there's so many missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, Black and brown girls and women, that they're just, I mean, I get trapped in this, like, well, we keep bringing it up every time there's a white girl that goes missing or whatever. And it's like, that's the agenda, right? That's part of the agenda. That's what I mean by it's not really hidden. So there's this idea of class and caste. And in the book that we read in the spring,
Gabby Petito, you just said it. That's class and caste. That's you want to know what caste and class look like? Gabby Petito. 2 words. That's it.
Thank you.
They are doing this for
I don't have to say anything else.
They're not doing it for any other Indigenous women that are missing and or killed. They're not doing it for the trans women of color that are being killed before the age even reach the age of 35. They're not doing it for our Black women that are being murdered, kidnapped, sex trafficked, human trafficked, our kids that are missing at crazy ages. But this one girl is America's what did they call her? America's sweetheart. I'm gonna shut up.
Well, so this idea, though, that I really liked this quote, or the way that she put this, because it's the idea that if you can't act your way out of it, and by act means, you get this kind of education, you get this kind of job, these kinds of people, and it doesn't matter how high up you go, because like LeBron said, and she pulled this from one of his interviews, you are this. If you are an African American man or African American woman, You will always be that. That is what you will be first and foremost. And so it doesn't matter how rich I am. It doesn't matter how popular I am. I mean, you know, we're talking about the president and the first lady as being, you know, like the highest that you can be in this country, and they're not immune to it. And then the example of any celebrities who have to encounter or have encounters with law enforcement, you're Black first, or you're brown first, or you're Asian first.
Exactly. And I didn't even know about that story about Forrest Whitaker. Him walking into a deli. So I don't know, Gerald, if you read the chapter or not, but Forrest Whitaker walked into a deli in 2013. It was 2013, not too long ago. And he saw that it was just like too crowded, and you know, he just didn't want to waste the time waiting around for a table or whatever. So he kind of like peeped it out, and then he bounced. He turned around and he was getting ready to leave. But one of the employees blocked him at the door and started to fucking frisk him. Excuse me. Didn't mean to drop the F-bomb.
No.
Started to frisk him. Totally traumatized the man. So started to frisk him and wouldn't let him leave. And then when the owners found out, they apologized and fired that person that did that. And, you know, it should have never been done before. So it just goes to show you can be the wealthiest, most visualized, seen person in Hollywood. But if you're Black, you still get treated like any other Black person off the street that people fear or not comfortable around. So yeah, that if you want to, that's page 106, I think.
And I definitely catch up.
Go ahead,
I definitely need to catch up because I definitely am intrigued by these stories and, you know, the mindset of the book. So I definitely need to get caught up. But however, I can definitely tell you personal experience that I've had. You know, I have a good heart to help people. Like, to be honest, for when I had hospital care, I paid for all that out of my own pocket. That career, that huge career fair, I paid all that out of my own pocket. So I do have a good heart, but that good heart can't be seen based upon my outward appearance. So I remember I was living in Minnesota at the time for an internship in my young days of college, and the company had placed the interns, I believe, in a senior citizen neighborhood. And at that time, I had a flip phone, so it was, you know, a while ago. I think it was maybe 2008 or 2007. So I was in an internship, and I didn't have good reception from where all the interns were staying at. So at times, I would just walk down to the park and just, you know, talk on my phone because I didn't have good reception. And I remember there was one day, it wasn't that dark. It was still kind of light outside. I remember there was a policeman that was circling around. I don't know if someone had called him or someone made an announcement or something on the phone, or I called the police or something. But I remember that the car was circling around and pulled me over and asked me who I was, where did I stay, and all this other stuff. All because I was at the parties using my phone. And that could have been because of, I don't know who stays in the neighborhood. I know it was a senior citizen, but I was actually pulled over. And I can only imagine if I was a different color, if that would have happened. And so I'm not exempt as well. I mean, I'm a professor myself. I have a nonprofit. I have a good heart. I put on these events. But yeah, I'm not exempt as either. And it all comes down to a culture that hasn't been dismantled yet. So I thought I'll just share that.
No, I'm sorry that happened to you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry that happened to you. I have a young son, 19, and he drives, and he has a nice car. And I always worry that he's going to get pulled over, asking where'd you get the car from, or, you know. And for young Black men of color, or Black men, period, especially our African American men, they're moving targets. And I'm so sorry that happens to you. And that's not going to be the first or last time either, you know. And I'm sure, you know, people get in the elevator and run to the other side of the elevator, or say, no, wait. Or, you know, you might be walking down the street and somebody gets on the other side of the street because they don't want to walk past you. So there's always microaggressions daily. And unfortunately, I had to explain to my son that's something that he's just going to have to, unfortunately, get used to, because that's how ignorant society is.
Yeah. So that idea of that mindset,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think this is a good transitional point, because this next part, Pillar 3, Angel, you had sent me a message about this.
Yes. This is the one
and the control. You're like, I'm out. The control of marriage and mating. And so, again, we're talking about control over people's bodies, where they can be, where they can't be, being questioned, right? If you look a certain way and you're in the wrong neighborhood. But this, again, 1600s, pervasive ideas about the way that people should be allowed to mate, to look at each other, to be around each other. And I'll define endogamy for people who aren't familiar. She does define it in the book. So this is taken from the book, not from a dictionary. Restricting marriages to people within the same caste. So this idea obviously can't exist unless there's a caste system, right? So there's a caste system in place. These are the different castes. And now that you know what the castes are, you're very familiar with them. And this is me talking to society. Hey, society, now that you know there's a caste system and that you are within this caste, we've identified you as such. Now you can only marry people within that caste, and don't bother looking at anyone else or you'll be punished.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that
Any thoughts? Who has thoughts? Who has thoughts about this?
But isn't that the irony in some of the things they talked about, especially the white slave owners raping women, and they didn't want them to have to give that up. So let's identify with the mother, and so they created laws. And the only reason, what was the guy's name? It was it Hugh Davis?
This guy?
Yeah, and yeah, there you go. And always ready. But in his punishment, because he apparently looked at her differently. And I always wondered, she didn't really specify what that meant.
No, they had. Wait. I thought they were together.
Yeah, they
It
were
says
together.
abused himself to the dishonor of God.
Yes.
And the shame of Christians. So not just whatever himself, but like all of us. You're shaming all of us.
Right, by defiling his
defiling
body, by lying with a Negro. Yeah, it's right here. I see it. So they're basically setting an example with him, saying this is what's going to happen to you if you sleep or get romantically involved or have any physical contact with a Negro. And that was what they set those, what they called caste boundaries. Yeah. And
he was punished. I think so that's the whole, so he was the one that was punished. He's the one, and this was before the law about lineage and the mother being, this was what, 30 years before? Was it the 62 or something like that? So he was the one that was punished because he's the one that crossed into that area and shamed all Christians and defiled his body.
Yeah. And then 10 years later, was it Robert Sweet had to do penance because he got a woman pregnant. And instead of him being punished, this pregnant woman was whipped and degraded, despite her being pregnant, which would have protected most of us, especially women. You know, you don't do that to a pregnant woman, but they didn't care because she was Black. Yeah.
Yep. 10 years. So in those 10 years, and this doesn't go into specifically like what historically was happening during that time, but in those 10 years, they went from that white man being punished for defiling his body under this Christian God and our beliefs to, oh, it's not your fault. So this is I mean,
It's not
this
your
is where
fault.
like rape culture starts, right? This is where we started rape culture. It wasn't the perpetrator. We're gonna punish the victim.
Yeah.
Yep. So what was that? 1640?
40. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. About 1640.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And then in what, 1691, Virginia became the first colony to outlaw marriage between blacks and whites. That was,
Yes.
yeah.
So that was right around. So we're making decisions about who can marry within what caste. Then we're deciding that if there's a woman who has children, those children, if she's enslaved, those children will also be enslaved, and there's no way for those children to ever move out of that caste. And so little by little, they're establishing the rule of law. And 1691 was that was the first recorded in the first colony that recorded an actual ban on marriages between. It doesn't say caste in their rules.
No,
but,
it doesn't say caste, but
but then that wasn't overturned until 1967. This is 300 years later.
But within that 300 years, 41 of the 50 states passed laws making intermarriage a crime punishable by up to a fine of $5,000 and up to 10 years in prison. This is up for 300 years. And some states went so far as to forbid the passage of any law permitting intermarriage.
Yeah, don't even think about it. Don't even think about making another law that allows you to marry whoever you want.
Yeah, exactly.
300 years. So I know that people, I feel like part of the issue with a lot of people is like we say, oh, in 1630, Hugh Davis was beaten in the town square in front of everybody, and because he shamed his body or whatever, and they think, oh, well, that was the 1600s, like that. Something going on. I feel like you're under attack.
Okay, so I live in an RV, and there's freaking thunder and lightning, and something hit something over here, and I'm like freaking out right now.
Oh,
I'm like a sitting duck right now. I'm hoping I don't get. So if I go black, somebody call 911. That means I got hit.
You're at San Diego? Was that?
Uh-huh.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm in Chula Vista area, unincorporated Bonita. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Thunder and lightning right now. Sorry about that.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll keep it on. I just keep hearing. I'm like, what's going on over there?
Yes, thunder.
I feel like it's one of those things that people can't quite. It seems like an abstract thing. You say 300 years. It's like when you talk to people about slavery. They don't want to like, oh my God, that was such a long time ago. Quit talking about it. It doesn't even matter anymore. That's sort of like what this is. And even saying 1967 seems like, oh my God, well, that got taken care of such a long time ago. Why are you even complaining
only
about
like 55 years, 54 years ago, 56 years ago, something like that.
4 years ago.
But it was the 1900s.
Right? But
It was the 1900s.
the trippy part is that Alabama, 2000. Really? 40% of the electorate in the referendum voted in favor of keeping the marriage on the books.
40% of voters in Alabama, of people who voted in 2000, said, "Yeah, we're not ready for that."
Yeah, we're not feeling
Not
that.
ready.
So we're gonna keep it on the books. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, those are baby boomers, and hopefully most of them have passed away by now. I'm praying.
Wow.
Hopefully. Hey.
And,
I
and that's
support your
interesting. That's very interesting. I think someone had said it. Some of the cultures that some of these people grow up in, because even as kids, kids are like sponges. They absorb everything.
Mm-hmm.
And when they grow up in these type of environments, these type of mindsets within their household, it becomes their norm. And it really kind of directs how they're thinking. So I mean, and I don't judge anyone. I love everybody as I love myself. I treat everyone equally and so forth. But when it comes to like these certain mindsets, it seems like they're not foreign at all. It's like they very current. Only because how the mind works is whatever type of environment that we grow up in becomes our reality, and it becomes our norm. So is to me, it's a very serious thing, and we do need to be, cognitive, as I believe what was pointed out. Um, it's not that the mindset has changed; it's just the form of how it's being displayed has changed.
Yeah, that's what I said
So,
earlier.
Yeah, no, I know you said it, but I'm agreeing
It's
with
just
you.
now it's starting to like, okay, yeah, because I remember you were like kind of struggling, like, well, yeah, it's changed. It's just changed the way in which it.
So I'm just gonna put this back up because this next part actually goes more with the children being born and being used as property. This next comment, because they're putting this into code, right? They're codifying this. It's part of law, and then I think this is another one of those things where you're thinking this can't possibly be the reason. Like, this can't possibly be the reason that these laws are in place, right? There's like a legit legal reason for keeping society safe. This idea, the dominant gender and the dominant caste, eliminated the competition for its own women for all women.
Right. And it says right here on, I think it's 112, for much of American history, dominant caste men controlled who had access to whom for romantic liaisons and reproduction. That's just the bottom line.
So these laws, this Gerald, you're talking about mindset. It's, to me, I feel like when we talk about these things, and I know I just said it, but I feel like when we talk about these things, it's hard to fathom that there is a specific reason for why. It wasn't just like, oh, they're racist. No, there's a specific reason for why this is built this way. And a caste system is not going to be beneficial to the highest caste unless they're really, really gaining something off of the bottom castes, right? Either through enslavement and profit, or they're fighting amongst each other so they can steal all the money, whatever it is. In very basic terms, I know that's not how the economy works, even though it feels that way. But this idea that the dominant gender of the dominant caste is really like getting together and talking about it and saying, you know what we should do? Let's make that a law. And then they put it in the books and no one can do anything about it.
No. That's why I'm saying.
Today, right, in voting laws, we're watching them just change, like we've got it. And so somebody's having that conversation saying, we have to stop Black people from voting, because or Hispanics from voting. We have to stop it, because if we don't, then white folks aren't going to get elected. And it's just, with the thought process of let's do what's best for them, for all, and your platforms and things like that. It's let's stop as many people as we can from voting, because we know we're going to get voted out.
Right. And the other thing is we have to do our due diligence and find these old laws that are still being practiced and bringing them up to have them removed. And they're not brought up until a loophole happens or somebody gets arrested, and it's not applicable to their case until they make it relevant to their case. And then it's like, oh, well, that's a 400 or 500-year-old law. Well, what is that still doing on the books? Who's doing the due diligence of actually looking at these old laws and actually getting them removed from the books, and then also revamping the laws that we do have? Basically, we have to restructure the foundation of America. If you remember in the beginning, it's like the caste system is like building a house. It's like having a house. It's like when you go and you buy a house, you check the foundation, or let me go back. When you go to the doctor, they want a physical and history, right? So they want the history not only of you, but of your wife and your grandma and your mom and everybody that you're around. If you have kids, you know, so then they want both you and your spouse's information. Well, that's the same thing with America's history. We have to go back and see how it was built and then what those laws were, and then dismantle and take a lot of the laws that's still been on the books for hundreds of years and get them removed or get them changed, or if they're still applicable, getting them updated so they're equitable for everybody and not just white folks. So it's really right.
It'd be interesting to see what was happening like in 2000 in Alabama. Like why was that on the ballot? Like what ended up happening before that?
Something happened that brought that law up because nobody's thinking about it, and they dusted it off and they threw it up in there because it was still on the books and nobody had the foresight to actually get it squashed, right? So we can continue to have these conversations about the laws and about the foundation of America and how it was built and you know, point the finger and everything, but we also have to do part of the work too, and the due diligence too, on what laws are against folks, what rights do we really have, and dig up those old laws and get those laws removed from the book. So that's where you come in on the policy level, and you partner with your city council person or your county council person, and you figure out what those laws are and how they apply to you in the state or the city that you live in or the county that you live in. So yeah, we can talk about this till we're blue in the face, but we really need to do some legwork about it.
Oh, you're right. That's a good point, because especially like for where I am, where Richard and I are, these are small rural towns. So even with these small rural towns, especially in the county that we live in, it'll be interesting to see. I'm going to start asking questions. What's in place?
Like go to the Hall of Records. Go to your Hall of Records. Seriously, just go to your Hall of Records. They have them on microfiche or whatever, and you can go look. Oh, I just dated myself. Microfiche. They have it on the.
I know what you're talking about.
Right? They have it on. They have right. They have it on the computers now. They have updated. So, and then a lot of the stuff that was probably too old.
Oh wow!
Heard that.
I thought Gerald was scratching his microphone or something. That was loud.
Oh,
Somebody
that was right above me.
We're angering the gods.
Somebody's not happy because he's like all over me right now. I guess what I just said was it's not vibing with them. But no, seriously, we really do have to do our due diligence, you know.
That's a good point. It's a good point because like, okay, I have all this stuff to pull up, like all of these things from the 1800s, from the early 1900s, these things that were like, Congress took up the vote or the Supreme Court made a decision on these things, and it seems like it was a long time ago, but you're right, these are more like federal on the national level, and we all know about them, but unless we really start thinking about what locally is happening, even, you know, out of curiosity, but really to start thinking about, are there these kinds of laws? What kinds of laws are in place? Or even to find out like when something was reversed. Like if I'm curious about marriage, I mean, we're in California, so I don't know, but or like this 1922, like all of these things
that SCOTUS one, that one was funny. Okay, so Gerald, so Chinese and Japanese men both tried to get declared that they were Caucasian because they had light skin, you know, white skin like Caucasian, and they were close to the Caucasus Mountains in Russia. And, you know, they did the whole logistical thing, and then, you know, they broke it down, and they were legitimately, if you want to go by skin color, white folks, right? They were like, sorry.
Yeah, they were more Caucasian. They were more Caucasian than
they were Asian. Exactly.
But then they were like,
the Supreme Court straight said, we didn't mean you. Like, we didn't mean you. You know we don't mean you.
We were talking about us, not you. It applies to me, not you.
That. Not that white skin. This white skin.
Bye.
All of these. Go ahead.
I'm not surprised. And I like what you said too. There's always a reaction from an action. Whatever event that may have occurred that's kind of hidden somewhere that sometimes it doesn't seem as obvious, causes us a reaction, such as a new law or something to go through legislation or whatever it might be. Even myself, I'm going to start holding myself accountable to start seeing certain events that lead to other things. And like you said, I think you said go to the Hall of Records or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to some of these laws, and I'm even curious about that. I mean, there's even books I want to purchase and read about, so I can have I mean, I'm not gonna say a better understanding, but a better, more knowledge about how things have taken place and why they are how they are today. I mean, I even have a few books in mind that I definitely want to take a look at and purchase. One of the books is called A School History of Arkansas, which was, I guess, published back in 1927. But I think it's a good book pertaining to some things that have taken place even in today's time. So, I mean, just things like that. So,
Yeah, and
very informative.
I'm sorry, Gerald. What was that book again?
It's called A School History of Arkansas.
Oh, okay.
And I believe they have, well, it's in Arkansas. I believe they have a few in, I believe it's Fort Smith, I believe. I don't know. I have to do a little bit more research, but I think they have a few there. It's a very old book, though, but it's very informative.
Yeah, I think taking it upon ourselves to do that kind of research in our own, communities, and then also learning outside of, like, especially if you grew up in California, outside of this state, and then historically why? Because it does. I mean, it matters. Like, this is how we started the conversation, right? That, like, we need to know what was the mindset in the time that these decisions were being made, and what has carried through. And then what does it look like now?
exactly.
So when people want to argue like that, well, that's not why, or it's not about race or whatever, you're like, well, it's just the same, pile of shit. It's just painted a different color. Sorry. It still smells.
Who
I don't know how I
paints
use it. All of the things that I pulled up, all of the cases that I had pulled up are included in the last pillar, this purity versus pollution. We kind of, keep coming back to this idea that there's, human pollution in the caste system, and not being permitted to move your way through the caste system, no matter who you are, no matter how wealthy you are, no matter who you know. And I'm going to bring it back to religion because I really like this quote. This idea that Sunday morning has been called the most segregated hour in America. And I know I skipped over a bunch of stuff. We're getting to the top of the hour, but I wanted to make sure that, like, I know there's a lot, all of the different cases, but then I wanted to share this, and then I'll pull up the white tent idea because I think that's part of this. Like, when I think of white tents, I think of like the, especially in movies, like the traveling evangelists and things like that. Like, that's how I see it. Anyway, so this idea that religion doesn't save you in terms of caste either. And that's when how this whole thing started, right? We started looking at the sacred texts. We're told that this is the way it's supposed to be. So you have to follow those tenets. We're teaching you what it is, so you can't go against it. All of those kinds of things. But did you want to talk about the white tent a little bit? I can say I'm going back and forth now, so I'm sorry. It's not even in order anymore. But this, I think, plays into that religion piece, because Christianity, religion doesn't necessarily have to do with race in America. We're talking about America. Catholicism, Judaism, pick one. It kind of goes across the board. So this idea, well, I think of evangelists in the white tent, but this idea that the white tent just means the caste system, and this is the tent that is for white people, and the trials of all the middle castes, referring to anyone above, where we put Black people at the bottom. All of these people are now fighting, and it could be religious and it could be socioeconomic, but it doesn't matter how far up or down you think you're making your way in terms of class. You're never going to get under that white tent. Even if you're invited, like the example of Cubans in Florida coming over, immigration laws that were put in place. It's a big problem. I mean, even today, like we want to talk about, what that is, not necessarily today, but last year during the election, that was a big issue in Florida. People were talking about this, like, well, how are the Cubans going to vote? And it's like, well, what do you mean? Somebody wants an explanation. It's like, well, don't you know the history?
As white, because that's how the foundation was built. So
Right.
They had to go pull up old laws that accounted for Cubans from 1905. And because they had not changed that law from 1905, they were classified and could vote as white folks, Caucasians. Yeah. Which is insane, because once we didn't do our due diligence to check the laws prior to the voting year to see how people will be classified. And that one, you can't argue it. It's still on the books. They still have to honor it. That's one prime example of not doing due diligence.
Yep. We can also, it's not in this chapter, but my brain always goes to the census or anything that ever has to be filled out where you're asked to put in any kind of like cultural or racial references. And it's like the ongoing joke, but it's not really that funny when like you can't find yourself on the census. And it's like, okay, I'm not white, but I'm not Black, and I'm not Asian.
I know, and they're finally starting to put 2 or more races, and they're starting to put other things, but now they're
it's 2021.
Right. Now
it's
they're messing up the gender markers because, in California, you can change your driver's license to non-binary, and then you go and get triggered when you fill out your medical or your work application or any kind of credit application. It still says male, female. The county still has male, female, which is infuriating. And the city is, I think, finally caught up. At least the city of San Diego.
It changed on our college applications, right? I think we were talking about that.
It's slowly changing on the local level, but our, don't get me started.
Okay. So this, well into the 20th century, panic could afflict people in the dominant caste if ever a breach occurred. Angel, you mentioned last year. This is what last year kind of says to me. Like, so well into the 20th century, a panic can inflict people in dominant caste if ever a breach occurred. Any breach, anything that is a perceived breach. If you look at somebody, you talk about somebody, you're in somebody's space, you say the wrong thing, it's still, I mean, the triggering that happens.
But you know
the
what?
The panic that sets in.
And it's not, and it's on both sides too, because you have the trigger for white folks, they panic, and then you're violated and or killed. And then the trigger for me is, remember that, and I'm going to go back a bit in the book, but remember when you used to play, and I'm dating myself, and your parents said, come home when the lights come on. What is that? That's the sundown law, right? Remember? It forbade from being out in white towns or neighborhoods after sunset. So that's why your mom always said, get your butt home when you see them street lights come on. I want you on the front door, walking through the door when them street lights come on. And that wasn't anything that was like a rule just for parents. It was because that was their generation. We weren't supposed to be out after dark. As soon as it turns dusk and those street lights came on, you better be in your neighborhood or you better be in your house. And the sundown law is a trigger still for us. I still like now, my son is at work and he got off at 6 and it's dark and thundering and I'm freaking out because he's not at home. Anything could happen. You know what I mean? And
Right.
that is because that's a generational thing that's been instilled in me. And if you probably go look in your different city and your different locale and your municipal, that's probably still in the books. I
Right.
bet
It hasn't been challenged.
it hasn't been challenged. Look up the sundown laws in your city, in your county, and see if they're still on the books. That's a good homework.
This is sort of, I know, I like Gerald's example. I mean, that's a perfect example. I mean, you were saying, like, I remember it was still light out, but it was like, there's a threat now. So as soon as the sun starts to go down, you know where you need to be. And if there's a patrol out, they're going to question, like, you have no business not being
over.
Yeah.
And that still applies to the police. The law enforcement still use that rule as a tool, believe it or not.
Oh, I believe it.
Forever.
I mean, what's been implemented back then is still fully alive today.
Exactly.
And it's a culture. You know, I remember there was a college I was working at called Rio Salado Community College. I was an institutional research coordinator there in Arizona, and I participated in the diversity, I guess, department or club, whatever you call it. And we had a meeting. I remember myself explaining, you know, they were asking, what is racism? And to me, racism is a culture that we live in. It's a culture, and that culture, like I said, is still alive today. And it's unfortunate, but
it used to be a behavior, and now it's so ingrained in us, it's turned into a culture. So I look at it more as of a behavior. Hopefully that can be changed. You know what I mean? But yeah, I get what you're saying completely.
But I mean,
yeah, the way that all
and we ask ourselves, how can culture, like you said, you know, dismantle? How can culture be dismantled? And like I said, a lot of times what we experience from our five senses becomes our reality, which becomes our norm. And so to me, like I remember when Bill Cosby was trying to buy, what was it, NBC or something? He was trying to buy a TV station that a lot of people view, a lot of people watch. And I can only imagine if he was successful on buying that, because he had the money apparently. They were in negotiation. If he would have bought that, what type of things he would have showed and viewed to the normal people.
Yeah,
it probably would be a lot positive as far as defining how certain ethnicities are.
Yeah.
But look what happened when he was in the negotiation and the talks of it. All these things about him allegedly doing whatever all came about all of a sudden. And look what happened.
Because they sent an intern to go do research on him and find all the dirt that they could so they could kill the contract, so they can kill the negotiations, because they didn't want him to have that type of power. They didn't want him to have that type of access to media, you know. Already, I'm sure Oprah's already faced a lot of challenges, but she was able to make headway and actually made herself prominent in the media arena. But she's only one of a very few people who have had very good success. You know what I mean?
And it's because of media, social media too, that has the power to influence. That's why, you know, Facebook is now monitoring what people put on or put on their pages. Instagram is monitoring. Well, Facebook is Instagram and Twitter. But it's because of the power of influence to impact the masses. If I can put out one message that will reach millions of people, that has power, because it has the ability to influence people and to sway thoughts, to sway minds, and so forth. And I believe that's technically was the idea, the hidden agenda of making sure Bill Cosby was able to buy that station.
that's where the panic comes in, right?
That's
You're
the panic.
stepping outside. You're crossing that invisible line. You're creating an assault on our senses,
Exactly.
and then there's a panic. You've breached.
You breach their comfort
this is
zone.
making people uncomfortable. Yes, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're past the hour mark, and I did skip over a bunch of stuff, and I'm really sorry because it's also important, but I don't want to go too long because I know that we could do like a whole session on each one of the pillars. Like we could spend 8 weeks just talking about these things that are upholding the caste system in America. So thank you for bearing with me when it comes to skipping some of these things. And obviously, Angel, when you come back, you can always call back to some of the things that we didn't cover. So thank you for joining us for that. I want to, before we go, say thank you to Keith Woolridge, who is sponsoring the books that we're going to send down to San Diego for some students who are going to start reading the book. So thank you to him for that sponsorship. And then I want to remind everyone that Hispanic Heritage Month is September 15th through October 15th, so right around the middle. Last week, I showed off the cool shirt that I was wearing from Hija de tu Madre. And today I'm wearing these cool earrings that I got a lot of compliments on last week. They're from an Instagram store, Cadena Collective. They have clothes and jewelry, all inspired by our Hispanic culture, specifically from Mexico. So I wanted to highlight that because these earrings are amazing. They're hand-painted wood and they're beautiful. And then I also wanted to shout out to a good friend of mine. Her name is Reina Grande. She's an author. She has a new book coming out, which I love. The premise is that there are Irish soldiers fighting with Mexicans during revolution time, and it's like a love story, but also shows like politically and culturally what those differences are, and that's historical fiction. But she's written a ton of stuff, and she's even this book. I'm going to show off all her books right now. This is the youth edition. She's going to be her book is going to be used as the one county. Cal State Bakersfield is using it. A bunch of other universities. This is her first book that I use when I taught across 100 mountains. It's all about immigrants coming from Mexico, and she tells a great story. And I wanted to highlight her this month. And then next week we will be back with the second half of the Foundations of Caste, Pillars 5 through 8. Linda McBride will be joining us. Yay, London. And I guess that's it. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope to have all three of you back soon, and keep reading Caste, keep having conversations, and go do some research on ordinances in your area. Thanks for that, Angel. All right. Have a good week, everybody.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Angel. Bye, Gerald.
Bye. Nice meeting you.
Bye.